Om Tavakatamritam Taptajivanam Kavipiriditam Kalmashapam Shravanamangalam Srimadattatam Bhuvigarnantiye Burita Chanaha. The nectar of your words, the praise of poet-seers, elixir to parched souls, delight to listening ears. Cleanser of all sins is great and glorious. They who spread it far and wide on earth are most generous. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good evening, friends. We are continuing with the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. And for those that are following along in the book, we are on page 150. That's 150. And I'm going to start with the same paragraph, repeat the paragraph that I ended with last Wednesday. And the topic is on a Brahma devotee is asked whether God has form or whether God is formless. So Sri Ramakrishna is continuing on that topic. The forms and aspects of God disappear when one discriminates in accordance with the Vedanta philosophy. So here he's saying that the forms and aspects of God disappears when one discriminates in accordance with the Vedanta philosophy. Here he's talking about a jnani, one who wants to know God through reasoning, and discriminates between what is real, what is unreal, what is permanent, and what is impermanent. And in so doing, he has no need he basically also discriminates away all the forms of God. So that all that remains is God as God truly is in his highest form, in the formless aspect. So the forms and aspects of God disappear when one discriminates in accordance with the Vedanta philosophy. The ultimate conclusion of such discrimination is that Brahman alone is real, and this world of names and forms illusory. So again, he looks at the objects of this world and says, not this, neti, neti. That means this is transitory, this cannot be God. God is infinite and is beyond any change, is beyond time, is beyond form. So any forms he discriminates as not being the ultimate reality. So he's basically negating the world of name and form. Every object in this world has a form, and with that form is an associated name. So all these names and forms he considers illusory. And he continues, it is possible for a man to see the forms of God or to think of him as a person only so long as he is conscious that he is a devotee. When again he discriminates between what is real and unreal, what is permanent, what is impermanent, the last thing that he is discriminating is his ego. That means there is no one left to experience or describe or to feel the presence of God, because that requires an experiencer. Without the ego, there is no experiencer. So some small part of the ego has to remain to be able to experience God, to be able to love God, to be able to feel some relationship between the devotee and God. So you can think of God as a person, meaning God takes a form, in the form of a person that devotee has love for. Not just that, but also the attributes, human attributes, but glorified human attributes. We might say that a human has a certain amount of strength, but when we say that God is absolute strength, absolute power, or has infinite power, then we give all those human qualities infinite qualities. We don't say that God has just a limited power as a human being might have. So we're looking at a God that takes a form of a deity or some aspect of God that you have love for, but behind that form is the infinite power of God. So from the standpoint of discrimination, this ego of the devotee keeps him a little away from God. So the jnani has, by effacing their ego, has merged into God. There's nothing to identify him any longer as the jnani, as the person in trying to experience God. But a devotee, by keeping that ego of a devotee, that little bit of ego so they can experience God, also implies that he's a little distant. He is not fully immersed in experiencing God, but experiences God as a lover, as an object of love. So without that complete absorption into God, there's distance created. So, because he still identifies himself as a devotee, he cannot identify himself as God. So Ramakrishna continues, do you know why images of Krishna and Kali are 3.5 cubits high? For those that may not know, a cubit is about 18 inches. It's about the length from the elbow to the tip of the fingers. And this comes out to be about 5 feet 2 inches, or 5 feet 3 inches. So you'll see the images of Krishna or Kali are just that height. Then he says, why are they this height? Well, because of distance. Well, what does that mean? Well, he explains with an analogy. Again, on account of distance, the sun appears to be small. But if you go near it, you will find that the sun is so big that you won't be able to comprehend it. So here we have now the images of Krishna or Kali. They appear as 3.5 cubits high, but as we approach, as our love for them evolves and increases, as we begin to understand their power, we realize that, and we get closer, we realize that they are not just that small image, they are something much. That small image is only a representation, but they are something much grander than this. And when we even get so close that only a little trace of ego remains, we understand that they are infinite, almost infinite in form and in power. Just as when we get closer to the sun, you would not be able to see even the edges of the sun. You would just see the sun be that big. So again, on account of the sun, on account of distance, the sun appears to be small. But if you go near it, you will find the sun so big that you won't be able to comprehend it. Why have images of Krishna and Kali a dark blue color? That too is on account of distance. Like the water of a lake, which appears green, blue, or black from a distance. Go near. Take the water in the palm of your hand, and you will find that it has no color. The sky also appears blue from a distance. Go near, and you will see that it has no color at all. So as you approach Krishna or Kali, as close as you could almost touch it, by saying it's clear, the form has disappeared. There is no form. So we only see the form as relative to our distance away from our object of worship. But as we get closer and closer, we see that that form disappears. Therefore, I say that in the light of Vedantic reasoning, Brahman has no attributes. So these attributes we apply to God. God does not, God as God is, has no attributes, but we have given God attributes. We see God as, we imagine God as a form. We worship God in form, either Krishna or Kali or some other. And with that, we have applied certain attributes, attributes of all knowledge, all knowing, all powerful, infinite beauty, all kinds of attributes we have attached to these objects. But as we get closer and the forms disappear, so do all the attributes. And the Jnani, using reasoning, approaches the same God by also saying that God cannot be any of these limited forms or limited attributes, and in that way experiences God the same way as the Bhakta would if they made that final, that little bit of distance when they see that God is something beyond even the form and the attributes, but again, he can plunge right into it. A bhakti would also do so if they just let their ego go. So therefore I say that in the light of Vedantic reasoning, Brahman has no attributes. The real nature of Brahman cannot be described. But so long as your individuality is real, the world also is real, and equally real are the different forms of God, and the feeling that God is a person. So for most of us, I mean, many times devotees come here, or people interested in Vedanta, and they come here because they are attracted by this idea that God is impersonal, without form, and infinite, and they want to experience God with that experience. So they say, and one of the things that it's mentioned is that that you are God, everything, God is divinity is everywhere. I am God, you are God, everything, God is everywhere. So they try to imagine that, or think intellectually that they are God, and therefore they are divine, everything else is divine, but still they are conscious of all the things going on in the world. And also they read the Vedantic philosophies that the world is not real, that and so to overcome, I guess, their maybe bad experiences in the world or whatever they have gone through, they feel that the world is illusory, it is unreal, and so that philosophy appeals to their minds. However, Swami Ramakrishna is reminding us that, well, as long as we are conscious of this world, we cannot just say the world is unreal or is an illusion. It is real to us. And in that reality, when we look on God, we can only think of God on human terms. We don't know what infinite is. We can imagine it when we look at the open ocean or into the sky, the horizon, look into outer space. We can have some intellectual understanding of limitlessness, but we don't really understand what infinite is. So we're trying to understand something that's infinite with a finite mind. Just as when we take a magnifying glass and we want to look at something very tiny, if you want to look at anything finer, you need a stronger and stronger magnifying glass. And you need a microscope. And even then, to see atoms and molecules, you'll need an electron microscope, or you'll need X-rays, or you need some finer tools to be able to see the finer particles. Well, if our mind is still on the gross level, we won't be able to see the finer aspects of what is behind the objects of this world. And that is where we have to develop our mind. They call that developing purity of mind. And that's done through the spiritual practices and taking up that search with seriousness. So Swami Krishna continues, he's still talking to the Brahmo Samaj. He says, yours is the path of bhakti. That is very good. It is an easy path. Who can fully know the infinite God? And what need is there of knowing the infinite? Having attained this rare human birth, my supreme need is to develop love for the lotus feet of God. So Swami Krishna is looking at the devotees, the Brahmo Samaj, and saying that they are bhaktas because they are worshiping God, God with form, God with attributes. And he says that it's an easy path. Well, it's easier than being a jnani because you need great strength of mind to be able to start negating everything in this world, all the pleasures, all the objects, without the mind reattaching itself to those same objects. But if you feel that you are a lover of God, you are doing something similar by offering the things that you like to God as in a form of worship. And you don't want to take back things that you have offered to God. If you give a gift to a guest or to a friend, do you ask for that back? Or do you give it without any attachment and you give it out of love? So we take that form of love and give it a higher meaning toward love of God. So we choose an object of love, this Krishna or Kali, or any of the other gods and goddesses, or any god with attributes that you admire, Lord Shiva, for example, or Mother Durga. And you offer the things that you love to God, releasing your attachment from them to the point where you have given up everything until you finally offer up yourself. And then you have the same experience that the Jnani would have when they have negated everything, all worldly objects, all worldly experience. So yours is the path of bhakti. That is very good. It is an easy path. Who can fully know the infinite God? And what need is there of knowing the infinite? Having attained this rare human birth, my supreme need is to develop love for the lotus feet of God. So in this form of offering everything that you hold dear, offering that to God in form of worship, your love for God will only increase to the point, and so that is the whole point. Developing your love, the kind of love that you have for worldly things, but give it now a higher meaning to love of God. And you're still living in the finite world. There are many things you can offer God in the finite world. You also can offer all your joys and all your troubles, and it's almost like an infinite pool of, well, you can basically dump everything in there so that you don't hold any of that to yourself, but you just give it all to God. And you do so with the idea that you're doing this out of love. Even when you give God all your pains and sorrows, those are consuming your mind, but by giving them up to Him, you free yourself of them so that you can give even more of your mind to God. Then he says, if a jug of water is enough to remove my thirst, why should I measure the quantity of water in a lake? I become drunk on even half a bottle of wine. What is the use of my calculating the quantity of liquor in the tavern? What need is there of knowing the infinite? Our minds are very limited, and even small things give us joy. What can we understand of the infinite? So we start out small. We take baby steps. And if that satisfies us, then we give a little more and a little more. But we don't really, and in the end, if God is infinite, well then we will have that experience. But in the present state, our minds cannot contain what is infinite. So we start out with the small things. So we don't worry about all the big things that God is. We just say, well, God is here. Let me worship Him with love in the best way I can, with what I have. So what need is there of knowing the infinite? If you already get drunk on a small glass of liquor, imagine how intoxicated you would be if you were just drowned in liquor. You would not be able to withstand that. So we take it slowly. The various states of mind of the Brahmagyani are described in the Vedas. The path of knowledge is extremely difficult. One cannot obtain jnana if one has the least trace of worldliness and the slightest attachment to woman and gold. This is not the path for the Kali Yuga. Well, here Swami Nikhilananda has translated Kamana Kancha as woman and gold. but really it means lust and greed. When he would speak to the women, he would say, it would be translated as man and gold. So, in other words, lust and gold, lust and greed. So, in other words, if you are really a jnani, you cannot be attached to any form of enjoyment or the desires for enjoyment. You would not have the experience of Brahmajnani that a Brahmajnani could have. And that's why the path of knowledge is very difficult. Because we know from our experience, oh sure, maybe I'll take a resolution that I will not have this enjoyment, but then somehow or the other, weeks, months later, the old urge to taste something or to have another drink or another smoke or something like this seems to come to our mind, and we think, well, maybe a little bit won't hurt. And then before you know it, we are back to our old ways. But if you actually have the strength of mind of a Brahmajnani, when you reject something, it's rejected. It's like cold turkey. The desire for more enjoyment no longer comes back to your mind. So that's why he says that path is very difficult. And that's why you cannot have even the least trace of worldliness or the slightest attachment to lust and gold. And in today's materialistic world, it's so pervasive. Objects of temptation, desires, things to remind you of your desires. It's very difficult to lead that path in this, what he says, the Kali Yuga. And the path of bhakti, we offer these things to God rather than partaking of them yourself, or offer them to God first and take them as prasad or as basically as a leftover. So that's why he says that this path of Brahmajnani is not the path for the Kali Yuga. That means in the general sense, there may well be one or two or a few individuals that are quite capable of following this path, but generally speaking, bhakti is the path for this age, for the Kali Yuga age. But Sri Ramakrishna qualifies it. He says, not pure bhakti, but bhakti mixed with a bit of jnana. In other words, develop all the love and devotion for God, but you have to apply reasoning also. If you don't apply reasoning, then you start to become more fanatical. You just, you start thinking that what you're doing is the best, and you're trying to make everybody else follow that. But bhakti is still quite, one person's form of bhakti is not necessarily applicable to the other person, because everyone has their own attachments, their own desires, their own inclinations. So the form of bhakti is specific to that person. So you don't want someone saying, well, my bhakti is better than your bhakti. So apply some reasoning and say, no, this path that works for me, and this is the path I should follow. What works for that person is what they should follow. So I will conclude with that for today. And I will, if there are no questions, I will conclude with a chant. Actually, before I conclude with a chant, I would like to give a few announcements. And we have a special announcement. I don't know how many of you are aware or have kept in touch. There is a new movie out called America's First Guru, published or produced by PBS, by the Public Broadcasting Service. And if you go to their website, you can actually watch it. I will read to you what they say about that movie. America's First Guru is the compelling story of how a young and charismatic Indian monk named Swami Vivekananda, now nearly forgotten, forever changed American popular and spiritual culture at the First World's Parliament of Religions in Chicago. Vivekananda ultimately put in motion ideas that changed the collective conversation and became America's first guru. So I would encourage that if you have an hour and a half of your day, that you might want to watch that. I watched it a few nights back, and I was quite impressed because it actually describes the Vedanta movement in the West since Swami Vivekananda came to North America. You don't have to sign up for it. You can just watch it for free. But my experience as being with public broadcasting with PBS is that it's probably available to watch for about a month, and then you have to sign up. So give it a watch when you have time. So other announcements. This Friday, Swami Satyamananda will continue with the householder disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. And this Friday he will start on Adarlal Sen. And this Saturday we have Karma Yoga here in Seattle. So if you want to come, and it's from 10 o'clock in the morning to 1 p.m. It's to volunteer. And Swami Satyamananda will give a brief introduction on Karma Yoga before the work starts. And he will give a talk also this Sunday at 10 a.m. on Buddha's life and light. For those that may not be aware, Buddha's birthday celebration is usually in the month of May. And so that lecture will commemorate that. Also this Sunday night, we'll be having Ram Nam singing here in the chapel. That will be at 7 p.m. So thank you all very much for attending, and I will conclude with a chant. Om Niranjanam Nityam Anantarupam Bhaktanukampa Ritavigraham Vaye Ishavataram Paramesamityam Tvam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. We salute that Ramakrishna, who is without blemish, eternal and infinite in forms, who has assumed human form out of compassion for the devotees, who is God incarnate, the Supreme Lord, and who is most worshipful. Om, peace, peace, peace to all beings.